young people as clones of our sense of reality we want them to have. Be controllable. And we'll call it education. And it means that we'll take children from their parents at a very early age and we'll keep them there about 5 days a week at least, all the way through their formative years, and we'll pound them every day with our version of reality.
Burn your history books, kill your TVs. What you're being fed is disease. You are being led to dis-ease. Wake up your consciousness, live free.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Free Your Mind podcast. This is episode number 104, and I have a very exciting guest, a very special guest. To me, is a huge catalyst in my waking up process, Larken Rose. Now, Larken Rose is a self-described enemy of the state and a tax heretic, the author of several books, two of which were written during this one-year stay as a political prisoner in the U.S. prison system. Mr. Rose is an outspoken advocate for self-ownership and a voluntary society. And here shortly, he's going to be doing a seminar series, first one in Phoenix and the next one in Reading in May, called Candles in the Dark. So watch out for him and his new project that he's going to be doing. And make sure you go and check him out if he's coming to an area that is near you. Larken, welcome to the show. Great to have you, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure, dude. So let's get started, man. You've been to prison. You've actually been locked up, thrown in a cage, dragged out of your house involuntarily. And what did you go to prison for?
Not sending pieces of paper to the IRS. The official charge was willful failure to file. Wasn't even tax evasion. Wasn't even anything that interesting. Wasn't even a felony. It was just not sending pieces of paper to the IRS. And the thing is, that's not why it actually happened. It actually happened because I was very vocal about how they're misapplying the law and all that, which is something I don't bother to talk about these days. But they were very obvious about the fact that I was too vocal and loud about it. The thing is, there's not a crime against being vocal and loud. So they had to settle for, you didn't send us pieces of paper. So they gave me free room and board for a year, and I wrote 2 books and a music album and a bunch of other things while I was in there.
So what was that like?
I was in a minimum security federal prison camp, they call it, and it's not club fed. It's not this luxurious resort like some people imagine, but it's also not scary at all. It's not real prison. I literally wasn't locked in, except on the way in when you go into the real prison and get processed through their inefficient, stupid system. But in the prison camp, I literally could have walked away. The thing is, if people walk away, then they go and get you, and then they put you somewhere less pleasant. So it wasn't scary at all. It was just a giant, stupid waste of time. But I used the time to be productive and get books finished that I wouldn't have if I was on the outside, because then I would have lots of other more fun stuff to do.
Yeah, basically. Go ahead. Sorry.
So it's slightly ironic that they made me get my books done quicker.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. They provided you a nice environment with no distractions to
right.
Focus on, writing and creating. Even though you were locked up, they still cannot silence you, and I think that's important to know. And if you were to walk away, they would just add on a different charge and then throw you into a higher security place, and probably for many more years, and I assume that's kind of their plan.
Yeah, and that's why hardly anybody ever walks off the minimum security thing. It's either people who are in for short sentences for nonviolent crimes, because if you get in a fight at minimum security, they throw you somewhere else. At least minimum security, at least medium, if not higher. So people, everybody there, everyone knows. The people there aren't a threat to anybody and aren't a flight risk because they either had a short sentence to begin with or they had a long sentence and they're done almost all of it and they don't want to start over by walking away. So it really is just a stupid waste of time, but not scary, not violent, not prison movie version of prison, which I think higher security isn't even prison version movie of prison. But it is, there is violence and gang stuff at maximum security places and stuff like that. The minimum security camps is just kind of a dumb waste of time. And And the bureaucracy of government in action 24 hours a day. You can see how incompetent and inefficient and stupid they are.
Yeah. Well, and I think in the maximum security prisons, we have people that realize that they're not going anywhere no matter how hard they try, and it forms its own little subculture behind the walls. And I mean, it's a quagmire, but it's also, I've been locked up myself, and I remember thinking, you know what, all these people are just people just like me, and we're kind of in the same situations. I made friends, and it was an interesting observation to be in that place. I don't want to go back, but it's something that I'm not afraid of, and that's, I think that it's very important for people to realize that even though you were there, you were still working on exposing the fallacy that is government. And what books did you write in there?
All of Kicking the Dragon, which is now just exists as an ebook on my website, larkenrose.com. That's the entire story of my adventures with the IRS, what brought it on, the research, the meetings with the IRS, the trial. Because I said from the beginning, I hope to win, but whether I win or not, I want everybody else, first of all, don't do what I'm doing, because I'm not doing things to stay out of trouble. I'm doing things to get in trouble, whether I win or not. Because either way, there's going to be a lot that people can learn from what they see, because I'm going to basically make the federal government lie, cheat, and steal to try to shut me up. And whether they succeed or not, lots of people are going to see, wow, they just cheated their butts off the entire time. And they did. And I'm at least happy that a bunch of people still tell me that watching my quote-unquote adventures with the federal extortion racket is what started them on their path towards giving up statism, even though I was already a voluntarist at the time, before I knew anything about tax law or any of that. And it wasn't actually a protest, but I don't bother to get into the legal thing very often these days because people don't bother to research and find out. So I wrote Kicking the Dragon, which is, I hand wrote it in prison. Wow. Printed, it's 488 pages long. So handwritten, I don't know how many thousands it was. But they did give me a year. So that and The Iron Web, my novel, was written inside. It was edited and polished and stuff afterwards, but the entire story was written inside, again, by hand. So yeah, it was very productive when they gave me free room and board and nothing else to do.
So why a novel? Why not just stick with the facts?
Because there's so many ways in which people learn things and get inspired and understand things by way of entertainment. Because I've had a lot of people tell me, I really like the message, but I actually also really like the story in and of itself. Because if you give the impression, this actually ties in perfectly with Candles in the Dark. If you give the impression to somebody that you're basically saying to them, what you believe is stupid and wrong, you should sit there and shut up and I'm going to tell you what's right, people don't respond well to that.
That's right.
They get confrontational or they just run away. But if you can have a story, and it works whether it's a true story or a fictional story, that is entertaining and interesting and keeps them wanting to know what happens next, and along the way makes them think about things, then it isn't felt as preaching or evangelizing, and people go, yeah, I can imagine being in that situation, not sure what I would do or what I would think.
Right.
And so I just find it to be a fun way to get people to think about something without them feeling defensive and argumentative, which is exactly what Candles in the Dark is actually about, is training voluntarists and anarchists on how to talk to statists without making them freak out and run away. And I only accidentally know how to do that, having done it for over 20 years now, because I've been an anarchist for over 20 years now. And along the way, I learned a lot more about human psychology than just the philosophy of liberty. Because the philosophy of liberty, when you boil it down to its essence, is pretty dang simple. Like, nobody has the right to rule. We're all equals in that we each own ourselves, and we shouldn't commit aggression against each other. Like, that's not all that complicated. But watching the weird ways in which the human mind repels anything that doesn't fit with what they already believe or what they've been trained to believe. And it's just been fascinating to me, frustrating and fascinating, because it's like, you go to somebody and you explain that 2 + 2 = 4, and they say, but what about the roads, and run out the door.
Yeah, the roads, man. Those roads, they must be paved out of gold or something. I don't know, but
Right.
it is very frustrating. But any new information, people need to realize is held first against beliefs before it's accepted or dissected with critical thinking. And I can't believe it. I just got into this. As I said, you were one of the people that woke me up with all your YouTube videos. And if you don't know who Larken is, he's got a YouTube channel. What is your YouTube channel?
It's just youtube.com/LarkenRose, which is LARKENROSE.
Right. And then you also have a website, Larken, LARKENROSE.com as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have how many videos? I the ones that come to mind is the statism one, that little dot.
Right. There's the tiny dot. There's the Jones plantation. There's what anarchy isn't. There's message to the voting cattle. There's if you were king. And then there's dozens more that are just me sort of ranting on some subject or another. There's It Can't Happen Here, which is an hour-and-a-half documentary that I made that doesn't even get all the way to promoting and explaining voluntarism. It just shows that what people have been trained to think about their lovely country and their representatives and their constitution, it isn't new, it doesn't make any sense, and it isn't legitimate, and it's just a rehash of the same tyranny that's been going on around the world forever. And it does it with quotes from all the famous tyrants in history, and so it's I like it, and a lot of other people really like it. And even though it doesn't even all the way get to voluntarism, at the end it sort of hints at it. But it made a lot of people go, whoa, I didn't know that. I didn't know those were, I didn't know the Soviet Union was a democratically elected constitutional republic with a Bill of Rights. Yep, it worked so well at tricking people over here, they tried it over there, and it worked over there too.
Yeah, it's just a program. It's a program that, really, really gets people brainwashed. And, speaking of tyrants, I wanted to mention your other book, How to Be a Successful Tyrant, The Megalomaniac Manifesto, as well. And, it's crazy. And the other one that I've shared a lot with people is, it's like, I have the right to rob you, where you just kind of explain, look, just because I wrote on this piece of paper and all these guys in these suits agree with it, that makes it real.
Yeah. And it's funny to me how many, because I've done a bunch of different videos. I mean, I'm Allowed to Rob You, I think, took a whole half hour, maybe an hour to think up, plan, and tape. It was just sort of a spur of the moment thing. But it's funny because there's so many different little videos I've made about these simple little points, and different ones will resonate with different people. And people have told me that I'm Allowed to Rob You video changed my life. And it's funny to me because there's nothing sophisticated, and it's sort of simple and silly. But sometimes a simple, silly way is the best way to get somebody to think about something they've never looked at, that's been staring them in the face their whole life, and they just never looked at it.
Right, and it's like you said, it's not confrontational, it's simple, silly, it kind of goes under the radar and gets in there, plants some seeds for you to kind of chew over, and hopefully they start to sprout, and you start to look further into this subject. And you were a statist, weren't you, Larken?
Yep. It was back in 1996 I turned into an anarchist, but I was conservative-leaning, libertarian-leaning, constitutionalist sort of flavor statist before that. And that actually, it comes in really handy learning about the psychology of statism and how to deprogram people from the cult of government, because I was in it. Like almost everybody I know, including almost all the anarchists I know at one time or another, believed in the state. And I was, I even, it's embarrassing to admit now, but I campaigned and pushed for the 1994 Republican Revolution. And I thought, if these guys get in, that'll fix everything. They're going to slash government agencies and cut taxes and blah, and that'll save the day. Well, 2 years later, didn't fix anything, and I was an anarchist. But yeah, looking back at my own inability to think clearly and my own indoctrination, it matches what I see in other statists now. When you have to study their psychology and their thought patterns to know what they're thinking better than they do,
right?
Which actually isn't that difficult, because they take it on faith and they haven't questioned their beliefs, and they don't even really know what they think. Like, they haven't thought these things out. And when you ask simple questions, you can very quickly realize they didn't come to this conclusion by, applying logic to evidence. They just heard it their whole lives, and now they repeat it. And if you question them on any of it, I mean, even nicely and politely, just to get their views, they quickly trip over themselves. And that's the key. And it's something you can't do in a video or a book. Like, the reason I'm doing the Candles in the Dark thing to train voluntarists on how to actually get through to statists is because when it's a one-directional thing, like a book or a video, first of all, it's a challenge to get anybody to watch it or read it. But second of all, there's no back and forth. It's just it's one-directional preaching, basically. And immediately that limits how many people are going to pay attention. Like, it doesn't have to engage them. It doesn't have to involve them. It's just somebody throwing words at them. Whereas the most efficient, effective way I've ever seen, nobody has seen me do it in public because I don't do it in public. It's one-on-one discussions where almost everything I do is ask questions about what the statist believes and what they advocate and what they condone, to gently bring out in them the contradictions that are inside their head. Basically, I'm just trying to nudge them through what I went through myself, hopefully a little more quickly and comfortably than I went through it, because I did my intellectual kicking and screaming and trying to hang on to statism and trying to pretend there could be such a thing as legitimate government for quite a while. But the back and forth and there are so many little tricks and approaches that it's not even analogous to occult deprogramming. It is literally occult deprogramming. And you have to be very careful about how you phrase things and how you come across to the person, or they will get defensive and they will cling tighter to what they were taught to believe. Even if you're making a perfectly rational argument that logically destroys what they're saying, often that isn't enough, because when it's a faith-based belief you're up against, throwing reason at it just bounces off most of the time. But there are actual ways that I've learned over the last 20 years to gently tiptoe around the minefield of the human brain to get to the real them and what they really are and what they really value and what they really believe in, to show them that deep down inside they're already anarchists, they just don't know it.
Right.
And that, when you can do that, it works way better than if they feel like you're some outside foreign opinion trying to beat them over the head. Instead, you're trying to free the real them from false things they've been taught. It's basically, instead of free your mind, it's free somebody else's mind.
That's right.
Or invite them to free their own mind, actually, because ultimately they're the only ones who can do it. But you can help a lot. You can put the path in front of them and go, here it is, if you want to walk the path.
Well, and I think, everybody moves at different rates. That's what's beautiful about us all being individuals here on this plane of existence. We all come to, different conclusions, but it's as information is presented. But, one person isn't going to come to a conclusion at the same time as another person. And just like what you said, is freeing other people's mind, but they have to do the work. And they have to realize that, anarchism doesn't mean chaos or violence like we've been programmed, that it just simply means the absence of masters and rulers. And And I think that that's a huge part of it. And, you know, you talk about this stuff, and I think you go through scenarios in your Candles in the Dark seminars. What's one example that you can give on how you kind of open that door of acceptance with somebody who is solidly a statist?
Well, there's the Candles in the Dark seminars are a 2-day thing with 5 sessions, 3 the first day and 2 the second day. It starts with a lot of self-examination about how the voluntarist talks, how they come across. The more, the general psychology things, like if you appear as an outside opinion to them, they are immediately going to put up a wall and try to defend against it. Whereas if you can make it feel like you're on the side of the real them, that you view them as a good human being who's trying to do the right thing, but helping them to see that other people basically taught them things that are messing with their good intentions, right, so that you don't feel like the enemy. The enemy, you become an ally, and the enemy becomes not them or you, but things they may have been taught. But then you can get into specific lines of questioning, and there's a bunch of them. And actually, people who come to Candles in the Dark, I'm making a printed out folder of things that include a bunch of specific lines of questioning to use to sort of gently get people to start thinking about it. One that comes to mind, there's half a dozen different ones of these, but one that comes to mind is starting people questioning their blind loyalty to authority by basically saying, like, well, do you think that in other times, in other places, under other regimes, sometimes the quote-unquote lawbreakers were the good guys, the people who actually disobeyed authority and resisted, like if you're talking about Soviet Union or Nazi Germany or whatever? And everybody will say, well, yeah, in that case, the good guys were the underdog rebels. And, how many books and movies are there about the underdogs resisting an unjust authority? It's like, okay, so sometimes you accept that, authority isn't constant. It isn't always, it isn't always authority. It doesn't always have the right to rule, and often people have the right to resist. And then you move it a little bit closer to them and say, well, how about in this country, but in a former age, like when slavery was legal, do you think it was good for people to break the law? Or do you think they had a moral obligation to obey the law and like turn in runaway slaves and report stuff like that? Do you think it was bad for people to teach slaves to read because that was illegal? And most people still say, no, I think it's good that people broke the law for that too. Right. And you get it closer and closer and say, well, today, can you point at anything that like federal government does that you not only do you not like supporting it, you think it's actually destructive and counterproductive? And do you think you have a moral obligation to fund something that you think is destructive to society? And you get closer and closer to helping them start to question the thing they've been taught their whole life, which is that obedience is a virtue. And you have them come up with examples where, well, in this case, you should disobey, and in that case, you should disobey, until they get all the way to the point of realizing, wait a minute, if I'm the one deciding when I should obey and disobey, then it's not authority anymore. Like, then I'm the decider. Then I'm in charge of my life, and, whether or not their commands match what I should do, like I'm going to obey the law that says don't murder people, but it has nothing to do with the fact that the politicians wrote it down. It's because I think murdering people is bad. And I don't feel obligated to obey this law and this law and this law because those are bogus. And so these simple ways that go along with what people already think, although it's usually things they haven't thought about before. Right. But to bring out the fact that that's what they already believe. That's what matches their own values. And there are a bunch of different ways to do that. And Candles in the Dark goes through that and has a printed out thing that goes through a bunch of them that you can use to just get statists to start to think about that and start to think about, wait, maybe being a law-abiding taxpayer doesn't make me a good person. It makes me an enabler of some of the nastiest people in the world. I might have to kind of rethink things because, I always measured my goodness by my obedience. And now that's not at all the measure of goodness.
Right. You become complicit with your obedience instead of, being the good guy. And I like how you basically throw the ball in their court, the ball of empowerment, and ask the questions for them to decide and to them to start to really critically think instead of just presenting information. It's interaction, and rapport is power. When you know somebody, it's a lot more powerful than if you're just just randomly just stating information out, and you're engaging with them, and it becomes this organic type of growth that
right.
you can see right in front of you, and you can see those aha moments. And it's always perplexed to me that people get so crazy, or they love these movies like what's the one with the Cameron James Cameron movie with the blue people? I can't even think about it right now. Avatar. That's a perfect example.
Smurfs or Avatar, one of them.
Yeah, well, Smurfs too, but Avatar and all these movies that people are standing up against this so-called authority, and they love it. But when you start to apply that to your real life, they just don't see the connection sometimes. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. And that's just a matter of gently sort of like you said, it's feeding their values instead of beating them over the head with your own values. But showing them that deep down inside, this is what you think, this is what you believe, and there are ways to do that just by way of questioning. And that's also what a huge project I'm doing called The Mirror, which is an interactive computer-generated thing that basically does this process by itself. How people answer a question determines what question gets asked next, and it all happens in this 3D virtual world and stuff. That's many months away from being done. But Candles in the Dark is basically training people to do that on a one-on-one basis with the people they know and care about. Like not so much, arguing with some random faceless, nameless statist on Facebook for 5 minutes, but how many of us have in our real lives people who are close to us and that we care about, and how frustrating is it to see them still laboring under the misapprehensions that statism has put in their brain, and seeing them doing things that we know are destructive to them and the world and everybody else, and just because they don't understand and they don't see the lie they were taught yet. And so it really is one of the things I cover really early on is for the voluntarist to ask himself, why are you talking to this person? Are you talking to them because you want to beat them over the head and beat them in a debate and win and go, I was right, you were wrong? Mm-hmm. Or are you actually doing it for their benefit, to bring them up to where you are by giving them something, by having them see what you now see, and sort of pulling them up out of the pit of authoritarianism? Because the way you think of it, the way you're feeling about the conversation is absolutely going to come across to the other person. And if they feel like you're in combat mode, they're going to go into combat mode.
Right.
But if they feel like you're trying to give them something and help them and that you're on their side, even if they think you're wrong, they're way less likely to get combative and defensive and freak out and run away. And then you start to have a discussion. And as soon as you have an actual discussion, that's 99% of the challenge. As soon as there's a rational discussion going on, there's a really high likelihood that sooner or later they're going to escape statism. But that first little step of getting it from being, emotional knee-jerk responses because they can't think about it and don't want to hear it and can't process it, like that is like that first step is 99% of the journey. They still have to go through the process after that, but as soon as they're talking about it rationally, it's usually a done deal. It's usually just a matter of time by then for them to sort out the stuff in their own head.
Yeah, start freeing their own mind. And, you've opened up that door to the mind where they can start to really, start chewing it over. And just like when we start to learn new concepts in like calculus or something like that we sometimes need a tutor to just kind of explain this. And then once we get it, it's like, I've got it. And then,
Right.
and then we're done. And then we can help others get it as well. And then we start to see an exponential growth pattern. And that's where it starts to get interesting, because when you start waking up, one or two people, and then they start waking up two people. If you take, let's say, 30 days, if I wanted to do like a chore or something for my parents, I did this once. I said, you know what? Don't pay me $25 a week or whatever my allowance was. How about you just pay me 1 penny on the first day, and then every day after you just double whatever that is. And, by the end of the month, they owed me billions of dollars.
It's a good trick on people who don't understand exponential math.
Right, and that's, it illustrates. Just go to a calculator, folks, and put in 1 penny, double it, double it, double it, double it, and you'll see why it's important to know about the exponential growth pattern. And do you agree? Is that's the goal here? Is
Yeah. In fact, that's the reason for the title "Candles in the Dark." It's, one little candle, and then it lights another candle, and then each of them light another one. And eventually you have a room full of candles that's really dang bright, that's, did that one at a time. Well, it didn't have to be one at a time, because as it spreads, it becomes more and more at a time. But that's actually how humanity wakes up. It's how it's done it so many times before, too. So much of human progress was a few little fringe wackos saying something radical like, I think maybe slavery is bad. And they kept saying it, and they said it in different ways, and they kept, appealing to other people's goodness. And then other people would say, well, yeah, it's not great, but it's necessary. Well, maybe it's not even necessary. Well, yeah, maybe it's evil. You're totally right. And I'm going to tell all the people I know about it. This is how almost all of progress happens. I mean, what's the quote? Something about like, never doubt that a small group of determined people can change the world, because it's the only thing that ever has.
Absolutely.
And that's how it always starts, is the little flame that spreads itself. And so that's why it's called Candles in the Dark, is, those of us who got the flame from wherever we got it from, whether it's reading or a friend of ours or whatever, we just pass it on until it's everywhere, and then we're out of the dark ages, as I refer to it, because I think in the long run, the time at which human beings believed in government will look like the dark ages for thousands of years to come. It's like, whoa, back then we actually thought that there were such a thing as rightful rulers. Like, divine right of politicians will look as stupid to them then as divine right of kings looks to us now.
That's right. You can't bestow a certain right that we do not have as individuals. And I think it's important to know that when you light another person's candle, you still have your candle. You're not giving your flame away. You still have that, and you're just lighting more. And, it's just like igniting the brush fires in the hearts and minds. I think that's another quote that comes to mind here as you talk about this. Look at how fire spreads. It starts with just a little spark, and then pretty soon we got a raging fire. So, I want to mention too your other book here that we talk about this, and especially during the Trump campaign, I was suggesting this to people because when they would ask who I'm voting for, I would say I don't vote, and man, they came down on me like I was the problem. And I had to let them know about the most dangerous superstition that, in my opinion, it's one of the top 5 books ever written. I want to commend you for that, Larken.
Thank you. It's definitely the most important thing I've ever written.
Yeah. Do you want to speak on that? When did you write that book, and what was the catalyst, and how did that come together?
I actually intentionally delayed writing that. I mean, I already had the idea. I don't even know. It was shortly after 2000 probably. But I thought there are still better ways to say things. There are still things I should be more clear in my own head about to make it, for me to make it as good as it should be. I don't want to write it and 2 years later think, oh, I should have said it that way. I should have explained it this way. So I actually intentionally dragged my feet. I had an outline for that I made while in prison in 2006. But it wasn't for several years after. And it really, to me, it's the crux of the entire problem. It's the belief in authority, which it sounds slightly melodramatic, really is the devil. It is the essence of evil. And I don't say that, I'm not even religious. I don't say that, flippantly. To me, humanity is free will and conscience and the ability to choose and the ability to judge right from wrong and the choice to do the right thing.
That's right.
And so the antithesis of that is saying, instead of me deciding, instead of me using my conscience, instead of me even having a conscience or exercising my free will, I think I should obey that thing over there.
Authority.
Whether it's a church or a king or a parliament or a Congress or whatever it is, the notion of an external authority, a thing with the right to rule me that should override my own judgment, my own conscience, my own free will, that to me really is the ultimate sin. That is throwing away your humanity. Like, you might as well have been manufactured as a robot.
Wow.
If you're letting something else decide your actions for you. You literally just betrayed that which makes you human by believing in authority. And most of us are meticulously trained to believe in authority and trained to think that, to associate that with goodness, which is the ultimate irony. Like, well, I'm obedient, so that makes me good.
Right.
No, you're obedient, so that makes you basically inhuman. You decided to shut off your own humanity in favor of blind obedience to an imaginary authority. So the most dangerous superstition, and this isn't spoiling a punchline. It gives the punchline on page 2 of the book, I think. The most dangerous superstition is the belief in authority. And these days, that mostly shows up as the belief in government, in civil government. But it was the same thing back when churches were claiming the right to rule, and
or
any variation on basically deferring your judgment and your responsibility to somebody else. Not only is that the ultimate sin, but it's also the cause of the vast majority of suffering and injustice in the world. You look at these big nasty empires doing horrible things. Who's actually doing it? It's not the guy at the top. He's just saying, hey, everybody do this. The people doing it are the ones that imagine him to be authority and go, yes, sir, I'll go do that right away. Never mind my own conscience or thinking for myself. And then they get paid by all the people who take pride in being law-abiding taxpayers. Yay, we do what we're told and we pay taxes and give it so they can build this big war machine to go blow people up.
Right.
The guy at the top by himself has zero power. He's zero threat to humanity, if not for the belief in authority of everyone underneath him. And you're not going to talk the nasty guy into not being nasty, but you can show everybody beneath him that believing in authority is mutually exclusive to being a good, responsible human being. You can't do both at the same time. And if people see that, like I accidentally saw along the way when I was still a statist, which is why I accidentally turned into an anarchist, by realizing government can't be legitimate. It can't have authority. I have to be in charge of myself. I have to use my own judgment and my own conscience. Nothing can take that responsibility away from me, and I should stop trying, and everybody else should stop trying to have something else take away our responsibility. And so that is the problem. The problem is not there are too many evil people in the world. It's there are too many good people who believe in authority.
Wow.
By a margin of thousands and thousands. That is the people who do evil. It's people who mean well and are basically decent, but they believe in authority and they do the bidding of rulers, and they run off and do evil stuff. And if that belief changes, you don't have to talk humanity into being good. They're already trying to be good. They're just horribly mistaken about what it means to be good. They think obedience is a virtue because they were taught to think that. And if they can be untaught that, and they can, suddenly, you can have that one crazy psycho in a corner saying, everybody kill everybody, and the rest of us go, you're just sort of a loony, we're going to ignore you.
No kidding. Who's this guy?
Right. And the threat's gone. Like, there's even a quote of mine that people have made into a meme. It's like, I don't care about one psychotic goofball with a stupid mustache. Without all the thousands or millions of people believing him to be authority, he's no threat. He's just a raving lunatic that nobody cares about.
Right, and they need to understand that the culpability lies with those that are taking action. Otherwise, you just have this guy that's being an idiot that's trying to control things, and they need to realize that these positions of power are perfect magnets for psychopaths. And
right.
It doesn't have to be, you said religion and you said government, but I also want to point out the Milgram experiments where this guy was just wearing a white coat. He had no clue who he was. He was just in a position of so-called authority, and 65% of people would literally shock somebody to death because somebody of authority said it was for a good reason.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And the Most Dangerous Superstition talks about the Milgram experiments because it's such a perfect example of, if you ever wanted an experiment that shows that good people plus the belief in authority equals evil stuff, this is it. But there's so many interesting things about that study, and one I constantly point out is that a lot of the people who were doing the shocking at the bidding of a perceived authority, they felt bad about it.
Yeah.
They would shake and they would quake and they would beg to be allowed to not do it. But they wouldn't stop, and nobody was threatening them. It was just the belief in authority. And the reason that's so important to me is it shows that this is not, a society of people who just can't wait to hurt their neighbors.
Right.
It's a society of people who don't want to hurt their neighbors. And of course, there are exceptions, but most people don't want to inflict pain on their fellow man, but they will if a perceived authority tells them to, because they were trained to.
Yeah.
And the Milgram experiments show that better than almost anything. There's also the sort of one step beyond that, or the
Stanford.
Was it the prison experiment?
Yeah, Stanford prison experiment.
Stanford, that's right.
Yeah.
Where not only, and my book gets into this too, not only does authority make people do bad stuff, it makes them worse than they're even authorized to do. Because if you can actually convince somebody that they have the moral right to forcibly control others, they're going to be sadistic monsters. Like, why wouldn't they be? You just convince them that other people are their property. And this is why you see so many abusive cops. Right. You convince them that they have the right to boss people around and control them, and then people wonder why so many of them get sadistic and nasty and violent, even beyond what their job says they're supposed to do, which is bad enough. And they get even worse. You're training them to be monsters. You're telling them that those other people don't matter as much as you. You have rights that they don't. The basic laws of morality don't apply to you because you're an agent of this magical, mystical thing called the law, and you get to do things they don't. And if they disobey you, they are bad. They are criminals, and they should be hurt. And if you convince the cop of that, and then you're surprised when he becomes a nasty, bonehead, like, why would that surprise you? You trained him to be a monster, and now he's a monster. Congratulations.
Well, and not only did you train him to be a monster, you gave him a mask to hide behind that's called a uniform.
Right. And, there's a section in the book called What the Badge Means, which is this little quote of, it expresses what a cop is basically saying by putting on the uniform and the badge. And I don't remember it all by heart, but it's basically like, I am now no longer a human being and shouldn't be judged as if I am.
Wow.
I'm now an agent of this thing called the law and authority and government. And as such, the rules of morality don't apply to me. And you're not allowed to treat me the same way. And you're not allowed to judge me the same way. And I'm not responsible in the same way for my actions. If you don't like what I'm doing, it's not my fault. Like, you can go beg masters to change, but I'm allowed to do this, and basically I'm superhuman.
Yep, just doing my job. Job. And it's basically, when we're all individuals here, we all have this free will. And there's a back to the Milgram experiment. There's a movie on Netflix, and I talked about this with Mark Passio, where this gentleman in that movie made me so proud that he stopped the experiment, and the experimenter said, "Continue, please." And he said, "Listen, I have the free will. I made the decision to come here to partake in this experiment, and I'm making the decision to stop right now." And that's where it's very important. But what happens is that these uniforms, and look at the name, uniform, one form. And so it allows that individual expression to hide behind or step into this one form that takes away that culpability for them, they think. But in actuality, absolutely it does not. If it's wrong for any person to do it, or if it's wrong for one person, it's wrong for anybody to do it, no matter what costume you're wearing.
Right. And so, and the most dangerous superstition goes through different categories of people and shows how the belief in authority affects all the different categories. Because if you see a cop beating up somebody else for like possessing the wrong plant, both of them are actually victims of authoritarian indoctrination.
Wow.
Now, at the time, I have a little bit of trouble feeling too much sympathy for the guy with the club and the uniform. But he's actually lied to, too. He's been duped into being a monster by him believing in authority. And obviously, it's obvious how the other guy's being victimized by it, getting beat up and thrown in a cage. But even the perpetrators of evil, soldiers and cops and bureaucrats and tax collectors, as well as being victimizers, they're also victims of the same lie. And so this lie trickles down the whole chain of command and just sort of rots at humanity from the inside out at every level. And it turns decent human beings into enemies of each other constantly. It turns them into, we're robbing ourselves, we're oppressing ourselves while the tyrants sit back and chuckle about it. There's an awesome, I think it's Alexis de Tocqueville. I've been meaning to do a video where it's just a dramatic reading of that. It's a fairly short blurb. I don't nearly remember it, but he's basically saying, who is it that's spying on you if you're not supplying the eyes yourself? Who's, stomping on you and kicking you if you're not supplying the feet? Talking to the people. It's like you're doing this to yourselves because those control freaks over there told you to. Oh, it's the thing that ends with, I don't ask you to topple the tyrant. Just step away and watch him collapse as a giant colossus or whatever it is. Because if we aren't enslaving and oppressing each other, the tyrant is just some rambling lunatic in a corner. And that, the linchpin of that whole game is the belief in authority. Because the moment people stop feeling an obligation to obey, that tyrant isn't a tyrant anymore. He's just one loony with nobody listening to him.
Absolutely, man. And that, these people need to realize they're being misguided. They're not doing the work of good. And, what you were saying about stepping away reminds me of the meme where this guy is on a plank of board where he's overhanging a ledge, and these people are standing on the other plank that are holding him safely there. But, as we walk away, there he goes. And that's what people need to realize, is that they need to stop believing this. And that's what it is. It requires your belief to be real. And, they're being misguided. And not only that, but reinforced by all these messages on the media that, tell people that cops and soldiers are courageous. And that's something that should be looked up to and admired. And not telling them the truth about this plant that these guys are taking away, that this plant can literally save lives. And,
right.
And that's when, a lot of a catalyst for a lot of people are getting sick or going through this the medical industrial complex, which are very similar, little Freudian there. But, look at the Surgeon General, look at the orders that your doctor gives you. And then, realize that, sometimes you're looking when that system has failed you. And there's many, many different stories. And I interviewed Rick Simpson on episode number 73, where we discussed my own story. And this was another variable in my awakening process of the evil of authority, that this woman who I've traded my life to be with is going to die without this much needed medicine, and you're going to throw me in a cage and allow her to die because somebody told you so. And
right.
that illustrates that we're dealing with evil here. Yeah.
And it's people tricked into evil, and that's what's so it's weird, because it's what's so frustrating, but it also what's so encouraging. Like, if the evil being done was a result of that many people being genuinely individually malicious, we'd be in big trouble.
Yeah.
The reason I have hope is it's mostly people who mean well, who've been taught this lie and are doing evil out of the indoctrination, not out of personal malice. And you can see that insanity. You can see it in the Milgram experiments. You can see it in how every single cop talks. Well, I may not agree with this law, but it's the law, so I'm still going to put you in a cage. Yeah. So you're basically saying you don't think I should be put in a cage, and you're going to put me in a cage anyway. You don't see something weird about that?
It's a walking contradiction.
And and the nice thing is if you can remove the contradiction, they stop being agents of evil. They're not all genuinely malicious. Some of them seem to be on a serious power trip.
Right.
But most people, tyrants are empowered and enriched by good people who don't understand reality. And without that, if you can get them to see reality, and that's what Candles in the Dark is about, lighting up the darkness, and get them to see the reality of the situation so they stop, empowering their own enslavers, the game just evaporates. You don't need a big revolution. You don't need some drastic, dramatic anything. You just step away from the one psycho, because we all sort of wake up from the indoctrination and the cult programming and go, oh yeah, they're just people, and they're not nice people or honest people, and why are we imagining an obligation to obey them? Never mind, just step away. And that's the end. You don't have to blow up the world and this, that, and the other. You just step away from evil and stop imagining an obligation to obey it.
Quit supporting the dominating model. That's basically it. Pull all support away from it, but you need to realize why. And, a contradiction is there because we're holding two truths where only one exists, and it needs to be evaluated. And, how do people evaluate contradictions? Just use the trivia method, or just keep on asking, looking for fallacies? What do you think?
Yeah, well, that's what Candles in the Dark does is nudge people to see their contradictions, because that's really almost all you need to do. And I tell people, there's another thing I cover early on in the seminar. Have realistic goals. Know what you're trying to accomplish. If your goal is in 15 minutes, the person's going to say, you're totally right, I was wrong my whole life, now I'm an anarchist.
So sorry.
You're probably going to be kind of disappointed pretty dang often. But if your goal is just to get them to see the contradiction in their own head, that you can do, and that is what matters. And even if it seems like they didn't change their mind, there are things to look for that are indications that they saw the problem. They saw the contradiction in their own head. It made them uncomfortable. They felt the cognitive dissonance. That's basically the best, nicest thing you could possibly do for another person, is gently lead them up to the contradiction that's inside their head, because they're probably not going to sort it out in front of you. They're not going to sort it out right then. But once they see it, for most people, it's going to nag at them until they do something about it. So most of the progress that's going to happen isn't going to be when you're there arguing with them. It's going to be when they're alone with their own thoughts, trying to sort out, what do I think about that? And that's how it was with me. It's how it was with, a lot of the anarchists I know. When you see in your own head, one of these things has to go because they don't match. There's A and B, and they're mutually exclusive. I got to figure out what to do. That's how a lot of people turn into anarchists. And so the goal when talking to somebody should just be to gently lead them up to the contradiction and show them it. And you can't make them do anything about it. You can't make them choose A over B. You can gently show them it and then let them do whatever they're going to do with it. And luckily, a lot of people, even if it takes a long time, will eventually choose the right side and give up the authoritarian side of the contradiction and become voluntarists.
Well, it's just like the allegory of planting a seed. You don't just plant a seed and then poof, we got a tree with fruit, right?
Exactly.
It takes some time for that seed to germinate, and it takes that time for that seed to sprout, and then it takes the time for that seed to grow, and then it takes some time for that fruit to begin blossoming and then budding out and then becoming the fruit that feeds others' minds. And so, it's not an instant gratification, but as long as you're planting seeds, it's something that is the work is done, and then hopefully we'll meet them on the other side where we can be together, awakening more and more of our fellow human beings.
And if they come back to you and ask for fertilizer, give it to them.
Yeah, there you go, man.
You can water it and fertilize it and stuff along the way, but it has to grow by itself.
That's right. You can't force it. I mean, you can help it, give it the environment, the proper nutrition, temperature. There's a lot of factors that go into this. and that will lead to that ideal, expanded and accelerated growth. So,
right.
Candles in the Dark, man. I mean, we're in 2017, and you're just starting this series, and I assume that you're going to be doing this all over the country, if not all over the world. First couple are in Phoenix, Arizona, and Redding, California.
Yeah, Redlands. It's just east of Los Angeles.
Oh, Redlands, California.
Yeah.
How do people sign up for this?
You can get if you go to my YouTube channel. There's the first video there is called "Candles in the Dark" and tells more about it. To get tickets, if you go to larkenrose.com and click on the store link at the top, you'll see the seminars. Right now, the only two that are all the way scheduled are Phoenix and Redlands. I'm hoping to do Eastern Pennsylvania and New Hampshire in June. I know I'm doing Denver in August. The other ones just depend on if I have scheduling and there's enough demand to make it worth it for me. Then I will do it. So I'm open to people saying, "Hey, over here, I think you could do one," and you'd get some interest. And so I do want to keep doing it as long as people want me to keep doing it, as long as it's worth it to them to keep showing up. And it is a paid thing. It's $115 it's a 2-day thing, like I said, and that includes lunch both days and 5 sessions. Oh, I realize we're running out of time. One thing we do is for the last session, we actually basically bribe statists to come in so that people can try out what they learn. So if an attendee has a statist friend or family member or something who will come in for $20, we'll pay them $50 to come in for 20 minutes just for the person to try the new approaches and for the rest of the group to see how it works and to see the difference it makes in how you approach their psychology, even if you're saying the exact same concepts, because you can say the exact same thing 2 different ways. One will make somebody freak out and run away, and one will make them go, I've never thought about that before. And that's what we need, is people to actually think. And navigating the minefield of human psychology to get somebody to think instead of freak out is the challenge. And I've accidentally along the way learned a bunch of tricks to make that happen, to get past the knee-jerk emotional reactions of most statists, to get to the real them and to connect with the real them and show them what you really are deep down inside as an anarchist. Don't say it in those words because we'll say, "No, I'm not," and run away. But to show them that patiently and slowly until they see it themselves.
Well, you got to navigate around those beliefs that are really, really indoctrinated in. And I love the fact that you're actually working. You're actually working in the seminar with statists so you can show people through direct experience, not just on a piece of paper or these techniques that I have used that works. Let's see them work. And I tell people as a dog trainer, I'm not the expert here. I'm a purveyor of information. I give you the information. This dog here is our expert. This dog is the one that tells us if it's working. And I don't mean to delegitimize or call people dogs at all. It's just that my perception of it, And so whenever we go to these dog training seminars, it's much, much more effective if you have these what we call working spots, where you bring a dog with you that's having some problems and we work through it. And, it's amazing the results that we get. And to see somebody else and to have direct experience through something instead of just reading about it is a whole different ballgame. That's the Gnostic approach, and I commend you, man. It's exciting. I can't wait to have you up here in Seattle.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
So, if people want to get a hold of you, is it just best to go to the website larkenrose.com or?
Yeah, my email is just larken@larkenrose.com. The only thing you have to remember is it's Larken. The other one will just fly into oblivion in the internet somewhere. But that goes directly to me, and I get a bazillion messages. So if I take a while to respond, don't be offended.
Well, Larken, your publications are in demand. The Kicking the Dragon is, if you wanted that in the printed edition, it's over $100. I think there's one for $85 on Amazon, but you do have that available on ebook.
The ebook is like $5, so it's slightly
much better.
Deal.
And then we have the How to Be a Successful Tyrant, the Most Dangerous Superstition. And if you do not have the book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, you need to check that out. That is amazing, a masterpiece. And then we have the Iron Web. Now, the Iron Web was great to give to my wife because she loves novels, man. And it was funny because I was telling her about it, and I think I messaged you when this happened, but I just all of a sudden saw it on her nightstand, and she was trudging through it, and I'm just like, yes, and now we're at a different place, and we've come together, and she starts to realize the contradiction that is authority, and the where people will go, to enforce it. And, I don't want to control 1,000. I don't want to control 1,000,000. I don't want to control anybody but myself.
Yeah.
And I don't, I don't get it. And that's why these positions are magnets for psychopaths. And we need to stop worshiping psychopaths, stop giving these guys, bestowing, this role upon this person that is absolutely impossible. And before we go, what do you think? I mean, this Trump cycle, do you think this is going to be a catalyst for more and more people to awaken? Or what do you think about the near future here, Larken?
There's so many things like that, today it's all in the news and people are talking about it. And to me, partly I'm old enough and have been doing this long enough that I see these as sort of just pointless little speed bumps and potholes that in the long run aren't going to matter. It was, a little bit discouraging that a bunch of people who seem to understand freedom were like, well, I'm going to support Trump because at least he's a step in the right direction. It's been a little bit encouraging in the last 2 days to see a bunch of them going, whoops, that didn't work, as he bombs the hell out of Syria. And okay, so he's doing exactly what we were all scared Hillary was going to do. So I think, and a thing I often mention is that, never gauge what a movement or what people believe just by what the loudest people say. Mm-hmm. So I check in with a whole bunch of anarchists and voluntarists. I know the vast majority of them didn't fall for Trump's lunacy. Some of the loudest ones did, rah, rah, rah. And so it gives the impression that a bunch of them did. Not very many of them actually did. And of the whatever small percentage did, a bunch of them are already backing off and going, oops, that didn't work. I know he wasn't perfect, but I was hoping he'd be a step in the right direction, but he's just another step down into the sewer. So let's not do that again. I think in the long run, he doesn't matter. None of the specific, whatever the tyrant of the day is, whatever the regime is, whoever gets elected, ultimately that doesn't matter. What matters is how many people understand and embrace the concept of self-ownership and non-aggression. And the news headlines day to day are just sort of a distraction that in the long run doesn't matter. As long as humanity doesn't literally nuke itself off the planet, then it's, statism is going to keep weakening and dwindling, and the understanding of actual freedom is going to keep growing, and the potholes and the speed bumps aren't going to matter in the long run.
My roads.
My roads.
And that's, I hope people see that Trump is just one hell of a salesman, man, because he's just the same, puppet that anybody is in that position. And, I just hope and pray that people realize that and don't fall or don't crawl further into the cave of authoritarianism and start to open their mind to different possibilities and realize that they've been misguided for so long. And that's why, these new seminars that you're going to be doing, Candles in the Dark, are so important to check out. So check them out, you guys. Larken Rose, LarkenRose.com. And, dude, thank you so much for your time today. I sure do appreciate you and the work you've done, and I encourage you to keep it up, Larken.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of the Free Your Mind podcast. Number 104. We love you, and we'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.